Welcome back. Muslims frequently find themselves the subject of conversation in the media and in political debates. It seems that some politicians and talking heads often have a lot to say about Muslims, but do they have their facts straight, or are their opinions based on stereotypes? How can we know what Muslim Canadians are really thinking? To paint an accurate portrait of Canada's Muslim community, the Environics Institute for Survey Research has launched its second national survey of Muslims in Canada. We are joined by Keith Neuman, Executive Director of the Environics Institute, and Kathy Bullock, President of the Tessellate Institute. They'll tell us about what they hope to achieve through this national survey. Kathy, Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So Kathy, I'd like to begin with you. Based on your research, when it comes to existing data and research on Canadian Muslims, what's your take on that in terms of your perspective as leading the Tessellate Institute and also as a professor yourself?
In the last decade, there's been an absolute explosion of literature about Canadian Muslims being produced by academics actually from all around the world, surprisingly. In the early 1900s, in 1990s and 2000s, there wasn't that much, but it's literally taken off. But academia has tended to focus on what's called field work or qualitative studies. So there's been no national quantitative study of the kind that Environics had done in 2006. So their 2006 survey is the only national quantitative opinion survey of Canadian Muslim opinion. And that's one of the reasons why it's very special and unique. But it does fit into a growing number of academic studies about Canadian Muslims.
So the public opinion has been missing in terms of national surveys, but in terms of the lay of the land of Canadian Muslims and research there, that's around, right?
Well, academics are focusing basically through their discipline. So there'll be psychological studies, mental health studies, immigrant studies, relocation studies, settlement. There's textual analysis of media and Canadian media, all kinds of qualitative studies about Canadian Muslim women, Muslim youth. And so they're always focused through the particular academics discipline that they're working in, whether it's political science or sociology or anthropology or economics. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it's focused, and it's focused on a particular topic, and it's done through the methodology appropriate to that discipline. But in terms of sort of like a broad-based, general, tapping the pulse of ordinary Canadian Muslims, there's nothing. I mean, the 2006 Environics, it's the only one.
So Keith, the 2006 survey that you guys did of Canadian Muslims, what was the driving force, and thinking of that from the political context as well?
Well, I think there were two things. There was the political context and post 9/11 and all of the aftermath and outfall, the impact on the Muslim community around the world, particularly in non-Muslim countries. Certainly Muslims in Canada were not unaffected by that. And I think one way to describe it is Muslims became sort of the new other group in Canada, in being a group that was somewhat targeted or seen in a very negative light. So that context was obviously there. But the other impetus was the wonderful work of the Pew Research Center based in Washington that did a terrific study in several European countries, the United States, looking at Muslim and non-Muslims. Excellent public opinion research that really sort of provided the important window into the Muslim experience and how the rest of those societies were seeing them. That was terrific research. However, they left Canada out. And when we asked the people at Pew why they didn't include Canada, they kind of wondered why we would ask that question. And it was clear that they didn't understand that there were probably 1 million Muslims living in this country. So Michael Adams, the founder of the Environics Institute, looked at this and felt that perhaps there was a need to do a Canadian version of the Pew study. So he brought me on board, and we did the Canadian version of the study. And that was actually the project that launched the nonprofit Environics Institute that has now continued to do other projects, and now we're looking to update the Muslim survey again.
Awesome. So in terms of the findings from the 2006 survey, I know you guys looked at a variety of things, public perceptions of Muslims, sort of how Muslims relate to their own Islamic identity. What were some major findings from the 2006 survey that you did?
And it was two surveys. There was a survey of the Muslim population, as Kathy described, and a survey of the rest of the Canadian population, the non-Muslim population, if you will. Certainly on the non-Muslim part, and there have been some other surveys we and others had done, certainly there were mixed views about Muslims in this country, and I don't think you could conclude that Canadians, non-Muslim Canadians had a single view. Some are positive, some are negative. I think what was clear is that there wasn't much understanding of who Muslims are and what their religion's about, so a certain amount of stereotyping and lack of appreciation. And in fact, what was interesting is that non-Muslims were more negative about how they felt Muslims were being treated than Muslims themselves, because they were looking at the news, they were hearing about the negative incidents, and they actually felt the experience for Muslims here was worse than what Muslims themselves were reporting. Probably one of the most interesting findings is that there was an assumption among a majority of Canadians who were not Muslim that Muslims in this country do not want to be part of Canadian society. They want to stick to their own communities and their own traditions and stay separate. But when we asked Muslims the same question, they had the opposite view, and they were saying, well, no, Muslims in this country, like myself, want to be part of Canadian society, and we don't want to stay in our own communities. We want to not necessarily completely blend in, be part of Canadian society while still maintaining our own identity and religion.
So Kathy, then building off of what Keith's just said, how do you think, now you guys are redoing the survey now, almost 10 years later, so how do you think these findings, do you think these findings are still relevant, or do you think they're going to change?
The 2006 findings, I think on a macro level, will still be relevant. I mean, Muslims still want to be part of Canada, they still want to make a contribution, they're still very proud of, immigrating here or being born here and growing up here. They still appreciate, multiculturalism and freedoms. I think on those macro levels, it's still the same. They'll probably still say the thing they most dislike about Canada is the weather.
I don't know, I love it, so.
They didn't all say that.
You didn't interview me.
But there's been a lot of important political changes, so there might be some different responses to how do you think the country is going. The 2006 survey, actually that was the year that the Harper government was elected, and since then we've seen a rising negative discourse against Muslims. I mean, it's always been there. It's just that it's become more pronounced at a governmental level than it had been before. And we've seen that now coming out in some policies that seem to be targeted against the Muslim community. And my sense is that if we ask some of those questions now about how do you feel about your place in Canada, belonging to Canada, prospects for the country, we might get different data than had been previously.
Keith, any thoughts on that?
I would agree with what Kathy's saying. I think the other thing about the 2015 survey is we are hoping, if we can raise some additional money, to expand the size of the sample and double it. And the value is that we can better capture the diversity of the Muslim community by looking at specific subgroups, by generation, by location, by other experiences, native versus immigrant. And with a larger sample, we'll be able to have a better understanding about what's in common in the Canadian Muslim community and how there are differences in both perspective and experiences.
So, Kathy, what role is the Tessellate Institute playing in terms of, supporting the survey that Environics Institute is partaking in?
Well, we came on at an early stage in the updated survey plan. In the beginning, our role was basically to affirm the need for it, to commend Environics for what they had done in the past and their willingness and interest in doing an update. To their, so basically like moral support. We committed to help fundraise the necessary money and to provide feedback on the development of the presentation back to potential sponsors, the survey questions, and hopefully some feedback into draft reports before they get released to the
We're
public.
counting on it.
So then, Keith, can you just take our viewers a little bit through where the 2015 survey is right now, in terms of, at what stage you guys are at?
Right. Well, we are now in the process of developing the questionnaire for the survey. It will certainly contain a number of questions from 2006 because we really want to see how there have been changes or not in some of those key indicators. Because without doing that, we don't know how things are changing or not. But we will be developing or including some new topics. We'll either be expanding topics that we started with and want to ask more questions about, or brand new topics about Muslims' experience in the country in various ways. Certainly in terms of the political climate that Kathy mentioned, we may want to expand questions. For instance, ask about C-51, the bill that obviously is very controversial. So we will be sort of wanting to go beyond the 2006 survey and building on top of it. In terms of timetable, we will be launching the survey in November. Okay. We really want to wait till after the federal election. We don't want the survey to be caught up in the politics of the election campaigns and so forth. Once all that's over, then it will be a better time to be out in the field, and will probably take us a couple of months. And then we plan to release the findings publicly early in 2016.
So just out of curiosity, will the questions change based on who comes into power in the federal election, or are you going to continue with the same set of questions that you guys are thinking of?
I mean, the questions aren't really about politics. They're about Muslim experiences in Canada in several thematic areas.
Yeah, but I mean, we would have time if some new issue comes up and there's something relevant that we might want to add. I guess we have the flexibility of doing it. But as Kathy said, it's not really about politics and policy. So there would be little, if any, change in the questionnaire.
So as we wrap up, one question for the both of you. Why should the average Canadian care about a survey of Muslims, both Muslims and people of other faith backgrounds?
Kathy, would you like to take the first cut at this?
People find surveys very abstract and not having much to do with their daily life. But in the end, there's a lot of fear about what's unknown. And especially, I think, from the non-Muslim point of view, Muslims look very scary. And there's a lot of debate and stuff going on in the news, and you look around and you see your neighbour and it's like, oh my God, is that neighbour going to, kill their daughter because she doesn't wear hijab? And this is all they kind of know about Muslims. So the survey brings data, it brings evidence, it brings the real world experiences of actual Muslim people in Canada. And that will, and it should, allay any kind of concerns that the regular Canadian would have who's not Muslim, because it will help make what's unknown known.
And the CBC, just to add, the 2006 survey that you guys did, that got net public coverage, right? It was covered on CBC and around the time that the Little Mosque on the Prairie was launched.
Yes, that was coincidental, but it really helped because I think the message of the program and the survey were very similar, that people in the Muslim community in many ways are very much like other Canadians. They're not just like other Canadians, but they very much have many of the same characteristics. And just to build on what Kathy said, surveys are a way by which people can learn what it's like to be someone unlike themselves in a way that's non-threatening. People pay attention to surveys. I mean, they are abstract in the sense that, it's numbers and statistics and so forth. But stories come out of the surveys, and narratives come out of the surveys, and it provides a sort of reality check, if you will, or an accuracy to the experience of a group or individuals that has the credibility based in science. It's not just what somebody thinks, but tells a story that in many ways is often more positive than the negative stereotypes. Through a survey like this, and this is what the CBC did very well in 2006, was tell the story when there were some very positive messages about the Muslim community. For people that had never met somebody who's Muslim and was relying only on the stereotypes, they could see a different side and perhaps take a little more comfort and a little more, feel a little more tolerance and acceptance and say, oh, well, maybe they are just like me in some ways. But the survey, I think, is also very important for the Muslim community. And I think it's because the Muslim community may know itself, unlike non-Muslims, but I think to see a survey like this done and then publicized, I think many Muslims may appreciate that this story is told, because it is a more accurate story, and they will appreciate the fact that this kind of research is there and it's out there, and what they may be telling their friends and what their friends may understand, other Canadians may appreciate as well. So I think part of this is intended to benefit the Muslim community as well.
And just because it's scientific and it's professional and therefore it's reliable, the 2006 survey, anytime anybody from academia or journalism or the policy world, if they want to talk about some kind of evidence-based opinion about Muslims in Canada, they will refer to the 2006 Environics survey. It's the only piece of data they can refer to, and so the 2016 or 15 update will be crucial to add to that. And like I said, just because it's scientific and it's reliable, and so it helps dispel all the anecdotes, right? It's not just anecdotal anymore. It's scientifically proven data.
So if someone wants to learn more information about this survey, where can they go to find out more?
Well, they can find out more information at the Environics Institute website, which is environicsinstitute.org, and there's a dedicated web page for this study, which they can easily find. And for those who may want to financially support the project, because we are looking for some additional money, they'll find the information on the website. And contributions of $1,000 or more are fully tax deductible through the In-Spirit Foundation, which is another one of our important partners.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much to both of you, and I definitely look forward. I know our entire team here will look forward to reading the report once it's out.
We look forward to sharing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.